رسول الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله حي على الصلاة حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح حي على الفلاح الله أكبر الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله.
إن الحمد لله الذي نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونؤمن به ونتوكل عليه ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلله فلا هادي له ونشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له ونشهد أن محمدا عبد الله ورسوله أرسله الله تعالى بالهدى ودين الحق ليظهره على الدين كله وكفى بالله شهيدا فصلى الله عليه وسلم تسليما كثيرا كثيرا. أما بعد فإن أصدق الحديث كتاب الله وخير الهدي هدي محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم وإن شر الأمور محدثاتها وكل محدثة بدعة وكل بدعة ضلالة وكل ضلالة في النار. يقول سبحانه وتعالى في كتابه الكريم بعد أن أقول أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم والذي قال لوالديه أف لكما أتعدانني أن أخرج وقد خلت القرون من قبلي وهما يستغيثان الله ويلك آمن إن وعد الله حق فيقول ما هذا إلا أساطير الأولين أولئك الذين حق عليهم القول في قد خلت من قبلهم من الجن والإنس إنهم كانوا خاسرين ولكل درجات مما عملوا وليوفيهم أعمالهم وهم لا يظلمون. صدق الله العظيم. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي. اللهم ثبتنا عند الموت بلا إله إلا الله واللهم اجعلنا من الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر. آمين يا رب العالمين. As a youth director, it's very, very important for me to understand the challenges that the youth are facing in this community and in the broader context of this country, and also equip myself with the knowledge and the tools and resources required to help those youth handle and deal with and overcome the struggles and challenges that they face. Similarly, what comes along with that is the parents. And parents, because they are the ones taking care of these youth who have problems, of course the parents themselves are also going through issues. And they need help dealing with their children who are going through their own issues. And so I also have to equip myself with the tools and resources and knowledge to help the parents deal with these kinds of situations as well. And so this khutbah, in this reminder from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in Surah Al-Ahqaf, is dedicated to parents primarily, but it is also dedicated to children somewhat, as we'll see when we go through this passage. And as we all know, if you're a parent, then you're also the child of your own parent as well. And if you are sitting here and you're not a parent at this point, that does not disqualify you from listening to this khutbah or benefiting from it. Rather, of course, inshallah, you may one day be a parent as well. And so hopefully this advice and this reminder can be of benefit for the rest of your lives, inshallah. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, instead of talking about theory or the theory of parenting, He actually talks about very practical examples in the Quran. And He gives us case studies of people and of parents and children that we can look at to take guidance for our own lives. And so he does this in the Quran many times, and the first example we will look at is that of Prophet Ibrahim alayhi salam. So the first half of this khutbah will primarily be looking at these case studies and looking at these examples of parents that Allah has given us and seeing what the trends are and how we can take advice from those stories and those examples. And the second half will be the portrayal, the ayat that I recited at the beginning of the khutbah, and how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about one specific scenario that a parent may face with a child and how to deal with it and what kind of advice Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives us. So the first is Prophet Ibrahim alayhi salam. And Prophet Ibrahim, his father, Azar, who is in the Quran, he is not only an idol worshipper, he is in fact the source of the idols in that community, in that society. He is the manufacturer of the idols. And the entire society at that time is filled with idol worshippers. It's all idol worshippers basically. So one can argue and one can say that Ibrahim alayhi salam didn't grow up in a very good environment. Nor did he grow up in a good household. In fact, everything in the household and in the environment were telling him to disobey Allah, to go against Allah. But Ibrahim alayhi salam, as we know, he grows up not only to be a prophet, but to be a champion of Tawheed in the oneness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And he is attributed and associated with all of the major monotheistic religions today. And in fact, he's known as the source or the leader or the main person of the religion of Islam. Millata abikum Ibrahim is Islam basically, is the religion of your father Ibrahim alayhi salam. So this person who grew up with a father who didn't really do much to support him and to provide him with the environment and the education that he needed to become the person that he eventually did, nor did the environment help him at all, but he still became who he became. So that's the first example, is of Prophet Ibrahim alayhi salam. And we take this first example and we look at our situation today. And one can say that the environment affects one's youth and one's child and one's family. Of course, that is true. The environment does play a part in affecting the way a person behaves, the way a person is raised, the way a person's personality is. What a person believes is heavily based on one's environment as well. But that doesn't mean that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has prevented you from thinking for yourself. That doesn't mean that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala hasn't given you ways of showing you what the truth is. And so that's the first example, and I want you to keep that in mind as we keep going in these examples, in these cases. And the second example is that of Prophet Yaqub alayhi salam. And his children, he basically had two different types of children, or two different sets of children. On one hand, you can say the good children, those who were obedient. Yusuf alayhi salam and Binyamin alayhi salam. And then on the other hand, you have the 10 brothers who for much of their life, they were disobedient. And they did things to displease their father and not to obey their father. And so, Yusuf alayhi salam is someone who became a prophet later on. But look what happened in his life to get him to that point. First, he is by his own brothers thrown in a well. And then he gets picked up by a caravan, ends up in a political household where there's a minister. He is attempted, or he's seduced by a woman in that setting. And then he ends up in jail. And we know that jail is not really the best place for any person to be or to have any positive influences. And yet he ends up eventually as one of the leaders of that society, of that community. And of course he became a prophet as well. And so we see that in the case of Yaqub alayhi salam, even Yusuf alayhi salam, who was not under the protection or not under the guidance of his father for a very long time, only at a young age, he went on to do great things and be a great person and a righteous person. And yet the sons who continued to be under the supervision and the guidance of a prophet of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Yaqub alayhi salam, they still rebelled against him for a very long time, until the very end, in which they turned around. And so we have to look, and the point of saying all of this is that when it comes to parenthood, when it comes to our children, there's not necessarily a full level of control that we can have upon our children. We see in the first scenario where you had a bad parent but a good child. Then you see a parent who no one can argue is a bad parent. Yaqub alayhi salam, no one can say that he was a bad parent. That he gave more attention to Yusuf alayhi salam and to Binyamin, and he didn't give as much attention to the other 10. No one can say that. He did his best to raise his children as best as he could. And 10 of them just didn't follow and went their own way. And he had two different sets of children. Some that were good, some that were bad. And then we look at another example from Surah Al-Kahf. in which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He tells us when Khidr alayhi salam was with Musa alayhi salam, in Khidr he kills a boy. He kills a boy, and then Musa alayhi salam asks him, why did you do this? In the reasoning he gives, he says that his parents are righteous people, and he would have grown up and he would have disobeyed them. طُغْيَانًا وَكُفْرًا. He would have rebelled against them and he would have disbelieved. He would have been a disbeliever. He would have been a hardship for them. So the point is that there were righteous parents who would have ended up raising a not righteous child. And then on the other hand, just right after, he mentions the case of an orphan boy or two orphan boys whose father had passed away, but he left them some treasure. And Musa alayhi salam had built a wall. And then he asked, why did you instruct me to do this? And it's because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wanted those boys to find that treasure later on so no one else would steal it or take it from them. Because, he says, وَكَانَ أَبُوهُمَا صَالِحًا, because their parents were righteous. Or at least their father was righteous. And so you see an example again of a father who was righteous and you have righteous children. Versus the parents who were righteous but the children who were not. The child who was not, in this case of Surah Al-Kahf. And so the point I'm trying to make again is that when it comes to our lives and our children, we don't have control, but we do have responsibility. We have responsibility over our children until a certain age. And we have a certain level of control upon our children to a certain age. And that is the age of adulthood. That is the age of maturity, which for most children nowadays is 12, 13, 14, 15 maybe at max. You have when they reach the age of maturity. And that is the point when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the angels start writing down the good deeds and bad deeds. Meaning that that person, that child, although we call him a child, and to you he will always or she will always be a child because you're their parent, they in fact are an adult at that point, and they are answerable to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for the actions that they do from that early age. And so we need to realize this, that we will be held accountable for the things that we did before they reach that age. And Allah will ask us, what did you do? Did you put your best effort? Did you try your best to give them all of the guidance and advice and the foundation that they needed when it comes to Islam, when it comes to this religion, so that once they reach the age of adulthood, they can carry it on and they can be confident in their religion? That's what we will be asked for. But we will not be questioned necessarily about the actions that they take when they are adults. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will ask them directly. We will not be held accountable for their actions. Even the Prophet ﷺ himself, he tells his daughter, Fatima radiallahu anha, he says, Ya Fatimatu bint Muhammad, ittaqillah, fa inni la amliku laki min Allahi shay'a. That I will not be able to make a case for you in the eyes of, in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala on the Day of Judgment. You will have to answer for your own actions. Even the daughter of the Messenger ﷺ himself is told by the Prophet ﷺ that she will not, that he cannot stand in between her and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. She will have to answer for her own actions. And so what we see is that, first of all, some of the lessons that we learn. Number one is definitely that when it comes to our children and the importance that we give to raising our children, we must try our best and we must give as much attention as we can give to raising our children, especially the fathers in here. Because many times the fathers will play a secondary role compared to the mothers, and that will always be the case. But the way we do it, it's pretty bad, it's pretty extreme. Where the fathers were involved in our businesses, in our work, and we will see our child and even our own wives for maybe a few hours a week. That shows that we don't care enough, that we don't place enough importance on the tarbiyah of our children. And then when they grow up and your daughter is not obeying you and is not doing the things that you told her to do, and your son is not obeying you and he's not according to what you expected, then you throw a fit. And then you're like, what's going on here? But you didn't put the time in the first place. And so a lot of times what happens with parents is that because they realize too late, after the children have already become adults, they've reached the age of maturity, they've lost control over them. Then they're like, I didn't do my job earlier, now I have to try to make it up. That ground that I lost earlier, where I wasn't there, now I need to try to be there. But the time has passed already. The time has passed. And then the second lesson we learn is that once our children do reach the age of maturity, then we, to a certain extent, must take a step back, and we cannot control everything that they do. We cannot control our children. And I've dealt with many parents who come to me of children who are in later high school or in college, where the kid got into drugs, or he, found a girl, and because she was involved in drugs, he got into drugs too. Or because, the daughter stopped wearing hijab, or the daughter's doing things that, she's not supposed to. These are real life cases that maybe even some of us here sitting here, mothers and fathers, can relate to and are actually experiencing as we speak. And so we'll talk about how to deal with this after we go through these ayat. Inshallah, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He actually exhibits and tells us this real example of what we could be dealing with when it comes to our children. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says, وَقَالَ وَالَّذِي قَالَ لِوَالِدَيْهِ أُفِّلْ لَكُمَا. I want you to put yourself in the shoes of a parent who's in this situation. Again, you might already be in this, but if you're not, then imagine you're in this situation. That he says that there will be a child who will tell his parents, "Uffil lakuma." Uff, if you look at any translation, says, "Woe upon both of you," which to most of us means nothing, right? In practical modern language, that doesn't really mean much. What "Uffil lakuma" really means in a more practical sense is that a parent who constantly tells the child, the son or the daughter, pray, pray, pray. Do your prayers, pray 5 times a day, fast, read Quran, memorize Quran. Get out of that drug situation, get rid of that person, that illicit relationship that you're not supposed to be in. The advice that a parent continuously gives to that child. And there comes a point when that child gets fed up. Because the child isn't listening, the parent keeps advising, the child gets fed up and says, "Uffil lakuma." Can you guys stop? Can you guys just stop with this? Can you stop trying to give me advice? Can you stop trying to control my life? This is what the child says to the parents. أُفِّلْ لَكُمَا أَتَعِدَانِنِي أَنْ أُخْرَجَ وَقَدْ خَلَتِ الْقُرُونُ مِنْ قَبْلِي. Are you saying that I'm going to be brought back? Are you saying that Allah is going to bring me back to life? That there will be a choice between heaven and hell in the next life? You're telling me all of these fairy tales. Leave me alone. I don't care about this. This is my problem to deal with. This is the type of mentality that some of our children will develop at this age, the late teenage years, the early 20 years, when they're in college and later. Where the parents continue to advise because they love their children so much, they care about their children so much, they want to set them straight. They don't no one who cares and loves that child so much, who has given so much time and attention to raise them, to get them where they're at, only for that child to turn around and disobey them and to disobey Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's natural for a parent to feel that way. And so this child says, "Uffil lakuma," and the parents respond, or the kid says, do you think that you're telling me that I'm going to be raised again, that I'm going to be held accountable for my actions? Just like, and he says, وَقَدْ خَلَتِ الْقُرُونُ مِنْ قَبْلِ. Those people who passed before, those nations who passed before, they haven't come back to life. They're still dead in the ground. What are you telling me? What is this stuff that you're telling me about? And the parents react, وَهُمَا يَسْتَغِيثَانِ اللَّهِ. That the parents, they make dua to Allah desperately. Istighatha, in practical terms, means when a town has a drought, they haven't experienced rainfall for a very, very long time, and they turn to Allah, making dua to bring down a miraculous rain. That's what istighatha is. And that's the word used for these parents. They are so desperate for their child to listen to them, for their child to obey them, and to be a righteous child and to obey Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that they make istighatha to Allah. They desperately ask Allah to bring a miracle down and to help them save their child and to make their child listen to them. وَهُمَا يَسْتَغِيثَانِ اللَّهُ وَيْلَكَ آمِنْ. And then they say to the child, وَيْلَكَ آمِنْ. Waylak is like a curse you. It's not only a name of one of the worst places in the hellfire, but in Arabic literature it's used as one of the worst curses that a person can give to another. Waylak, curse you. Amin, believe. Why don't you believe? And it's because, why does this happen? It's because the parents get to a point where they are so fed up with their child, where they tell the child again and again and again over the course of months and years to listen, to straighten up, to get out of these bad habits and these things that you're involved in. And the child doesn't listen. The child leaves home. The child runs away. The child, talks back to the parents. The child even sometimes physically will get, involved with their parents, hitting them in defiance. These are the types of situations some parents face. And the parents, when they see that there has been no progress made, where the child is not listening at all, in fact it's getting worse, Even the parents themselves get so frustrated where they get to a point where they even themselves curse their own child. And none of us in thinking rationally would ever do this. But sometimes the situation gets so frustrating that you can't even help yourself. Waylak, Amin, why don't you believe? Why don't you believe? The parents are trying to tell the child to believe, to listen, to listen. And so then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says, إِنَّ وَعْدَ اللَّهِ حَقٌّ فَيَقُولُ مَا هَذَا إِلَّا أَسَاطِيرُ الْأَوَّلِينَ. And then the child says that these are just old stories that you're trying to tell me and that you're trying to convince me of. I'm not going to listen to you, basically. And then in the next verse, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, I just want to address the children, the kids really quickly, in which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says, أُولَٰئِكَ الَّذِينَ حَقَّ عَلَيْهِمُ الْقَوْلُ فِي أُمَمٍ. That those are the people that the verdict of punishment is rightfully deserved. For the children in here who you may have put your parents through this, or you're putting your parents through this, or you're young and there's going to come a time when you're facing your own challenges and you're going to not want to listen to your parents and you're going to want to disobey them and not listen to them. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says this is no small crime. And there is not a small punishment for this. This is a great crime in the eyes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for a child for whose parents raised them and took care of them and did so much for them growing up and got them to the point that child would be nowhere without the parents, the love and the care and the mercy that the parents gave to that child. And that child only turns around and disobeys the parents and turns their back towards the parents. For that child, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that person, that young person is very deserving of the punishment that is in store for him or for her. This is the same story. قَدْ خَلَتْ مِنْ قَبْلِهِمْ مِنَ الْجِنِّ وَالْإِنسِ إِنَّهُمْ كَانُوا خَاسِرِينَ. That these are the same story. This is the same story from all kinds of human beings and jinn from much before. This rebellion from children to their parents is nothing new. This has been going on for many millennium and generations that came before. And then He says, وَلِكُلٍّ دَرَجَاتٌ مِمَّا عَمِلُوا. And you may not be at this point. For many of the children in here, you may not be at the point where you've gotten your parents to that extent where they even curse you, or that's how much conflict is within the family, within the parents and the children. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَلِكُلٍّ دَرَجَاتٌ مِمَّا عَمِلُوا. For every person will be to the extent to what he does. That even the least bit of disobedience to your parents, even the least bit of causing them pain and stress and harm, that you will also be asked about. Don't think Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives us the worst case scenario, the extreme example of what could happen between a parent and a child if it gets that bad. But don't think that even if it's not that bad, if you're disobeying your parents, if you're not doing what you've been told, if you're not obeying Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then don't think that you won't be asked about that either. Even if it's not that, but you still will be held accountable for even the smallest disobedience to your parents. And so now, to the parents, just some practical advice based on what has been said so far and based on the ayat and the guidance that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us. Number one, and this is, by the way, something that I share with all parents. This is kind of a reminder that one of my teachers went through and talked about in terms of how to deal with parents. I'm reading more books and resources on how to, advise, of course, myself. I'm a parent, so for myself first and foremost, and for every parent as well who approaches me with kind of a situation. I, of course, like I said, need to have the resources. And one of the examples that I give them, because most of them are dealing with kids that are in the late teens or that are in the early 20s in high school and college. And this is one of the advices that I give them. This is one of the reminders that I tell them that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us. And so, the first thing to realize is that you as a parent and myself as a parent, we have two different roles when it comes to our children. The first role is that of being a spiritual guide. That is of telling the child what is right, what is wrong. This is what you should do, and this is what you should not do. That's the first role, is that you tell them what's right and wrong. You try to have them be as close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, as close to Islam, and as close to a true Muslim as they can be, and as much as you can teach them. And then the second role is that of emotional support. One is spiritual, one is emotional, which means you're just a mom, you're just a dad to that person, to that child. You cook food for them, you take care of them, you hug them. They have problems, you're there to listen to them. That's all emotional stuff. And both the emotional and the spiritual are there up until the age of maturity. And once that person, once that child reaches that age of adulthood and that age of maturity, then what happens is that the spiritual aspect takes a back seat. Because you did all you could to provide spiritual guidance to them. Now, once they are adults and they are accountable for their own actions, now it's important for you to be an emotional support for them. Not to tell them every time they commit a mistake, what you're doing is wrong. You're going to end up in hell. Why don't you pray? Why don't you do this? The son comes home once a month and you scream at him. You tell him, oh, now you're going to show up. Or you're only here for Eid. You're doing this, you're doing that. And that person's going to storm out and walk away. You're trying to be a spiritual support and guide them, but it's making it worse. And you're not enabling that child to receive emotional support from you. You're completely disconnecting them from that. So it's very important for the parents who are in this kind of a situation that never ever close the doors intentionally or unintentionally to your children from an emotional standpoint. When they come home, if you haven't seen them for a few weeks, don't ask them, hey, where were you? Hey, what were you doing? Are you still with this person? Are you still involved in that stuff? No. Hey, can I make you something to eat? Hey, we're so glad you're home. Hey, let's go do something. Let's go out. Let's, do something that will emotionally attach them to you, because that attachment has been severed. So we must maintain that emotional connection with our children. In the spiritual, we try our best to do as much as we can after they've reached the age of adulthood. And one of the best examples in terms of the right timing that we can take and that we should take when it comes to our children and offering them advice is that of Luqman alayhi salam. And in the Quran, the passage in which Luqman alayhi salam talks to his son is one of the most elaborate passages about parenting in the Quran, if not the most elaborate. Although in and of itself it's short, but in terms of relatively compared to the other passages, this is one of the longest. And so Luqman alayhi salam, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us, وَإِذْ قَالَ لُقْمَانُ لِابْنِهِ. And when Luqman said to his son, وَهُوَ يَعِظُهُ, when he was in a position or a scenario where that advice could be given, there's many conditions laid out. It's not just لَا تُشْرِكْ بِاللَّهِ that Luqman alayhi salam says to his son, don't commit shirk with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, don't associate partners with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah starts by saying, وَإِذْ قَالَ لُقْمَانُ. And when the appropriate time came for Luqman alayhi salam to advise his son, while he was in a state where he would take that advice from his father, then he said, وَهُوَ يَعِدُهُ يَا بُنَيَّ لَا تُشْرِكْ بِاللَّهِ. My beloved son, don't associate partners with Allah. There's a couple of practical benefits we take from this. First, Luqman alayhi salam did not continuously tell his son, don't do shirk, don't do shirk, don't do shirk. If the son doesn't listen, don't do shirk. Like we do this with our kids so much, where we tell them, pray, pray, pray. Stop doing this, do this. All the time, it's constantly, do this and don't do that. And the child gets fed up. The child comes home and all the parents do is criticize him or her. All the parents do is tell them what they're doing wrong. And the child naturally will get fed up and he's like, forget this, man. Shaitan will come into that boy's or that girl's head and say, look at your parents, they don't love you. Look, they're criticizing you, just leave them, run away, get away, it's fine. Shaitan will come in their head and will tell them that. And so we have to be very careful with the way we deal with our children. Find the right time, maintain that emotional support that I talked about, and then find the right time. When things are good, when it's a nice setting, you're chilling on the sofas, whatever, setting, it's nice, it's cool, and be like, hey, what's going on with this situation? Is that still going on? Like what's going, And don't react in a negative way if they tell you, yeah, I'm still doing that, or yeah, I'm still involved in that situation. Be very patient with your children. And that is why when Yaqub alayhi salam was approached by his sons who threw Yusuf alayhi salam in the well, they came with the bloodied shirt and they said that he's been eaten. And Yaqub alayhi salam knew that they were lying, but he understood that if I say something, if I criticize them, and if I deal with this situation in a negative manner right now, then I will lose my kids altogether. So what he did is something that every parent for the rest of time should remember when dealing with children. فَصَبْرٌ جَمِيلٌ. I will exhibit beautiful patience when it comes to my kids, and I will wait until the time is right to deal with the situation of what they have done to Yusuf alayhi salam. And he was patient with them. He was patient with them. And there is a such thing as ugly patience, by the way. Just because you're being patient doesn't mean you're doing it in the right way. We must exhibit beautiful patience with our kids. And that's how Yaqub alayhi salam shows us his genius as a parent towards his kids who were disobedient to him and to his son and what they did to Yusuf alayhi salam. And eventually those kids came around by the end of the story. And so having said all of the above, we must again realize that our kids are going to make mistakes just like we made mistakes. And it's very important for us to be patient with our kids, just like Yaqub alayhi salam was patient, and give them advice when we know it's the right time to give advice, and not constantly criticizing them. And like I said, when they haven't reached the age of maturity, then we offer them an emotional and a spiritual support. But then once they reach the age of maturity and all they need is a mom or a dad to just take care of them, to just listen to them, to just hug them, then be there for them in that regard, on the emotional regard. And the spiritual must come strategically, must come at the right time. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala enable all of us to be wiser as parents. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make us patient with our kids. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect our children from the trials and the challenges and the struggles that they face. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forgive those of us who are children or who are children to our parents when we've made mistakes, when we've said something or done something against our parents that was not something we should have done. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forgive us for those moments. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala enable us all to be obedient children. Ameen ya Rabbil Alameen. أقول قولي هذا وأستغفر الله لي ولكم فاستغفروه إنه هو الغفور الرحيم. بسم الله والحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. يقول سبحانه وتعالى في كتابه الكريم بعد أن أقول أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما اللهم صل على محمد وعلى آل محمد كما صليت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم إنك حميد مجيد وبارك على محمد وعلى آل محمد كما باركت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم في العالمين إنك حميد مجيد. عباد الله رحمكم الله اتقوا الله إن الله يأمر بالعدل والإحسان وإيتاء ذي القربى وينهى عن الفحشاء والمنكر والبغي يعظكم لعلكم تذكرون ولذكر الله أكبر والله يعلم ما تصنعون. أقم الصلاة.